Everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Bullish Show. Today with me, Ben Johnson. Now, Ben is the CEO and founder of Particle41, and that has an interesting basis in that it's named after 𝓤𝓷, which is a metal whose ability to strengthen other metals is unmatched. He's a software development firm that provides businesses with support on application development, data science, and development operations projects. Ben is an experienced entrepreneur with 30 million raised across 5 startups and has 20 plus years of software development experience. So he knows how to code. So welcome to the show, Ben. It's an absolute pleasure, and I'm intrigued by how you got to start Particle41. But before we do that, I'd like to know, where did you get the entrepreneurial bug? When did that start?
Sure. Well, I appreciate it, and I'm really happy to be here talking with you. Serial entrepreneur. I mean, even in college, my buddies and I were talking about really creative ideas. Right in college, I was working for a dot-com bubble startup where we got to see, a handful of ideas. But as the dot-com bubble kind of came to a close, 99, 2000 timeframe, I started an online travel agency. It's called 𝓲𝓫. I think the brand's still around today.
Right.
But we were racking and stacking our own hardware. We ended up growing that to about 70 million in travel. Sold that company to a parent company that had no cash controls. They ended up running it in the ground in about 15 months.
Right.
But it was just an awesome venture to figure out how to do this thing on the internet that had traditionally been done over the phone, right? Now I get to order my airline tickets. This was before, just for your listeners to frame this is before Southwest Airlines even had an online website, before it existed. This is before Orbitz. I think Expedia and Travelocity were around back then.
Right.
But this was kind of early days, and we were able to integrate with like your kayaks and sidesteps and as meta search partners to accelerate our business. So we're doing some new things, but it was a huge opportunity to kind of figure out how the internet works and be a part of how to create that. And from there, I started a travel media company, went to a travel media company, and then also after that did a media company in finance. And being part of online advertising, got to really see how that really kind of peaked up the entrepreneurial bug, to see how folks were using advertising between like publishers on the web, all these bloggers and advertisers, and intermixing ad technology to maximize the value for those advertisers.
Right. So you went into travel media. And then what happened after that?
So after I did Travel Ad Network, which was this vertical ad network, that company raised a bunch of money, tried to pivot into a full-fledged media company, and kind of had a little sputtering. I took that opportunity to start or to work with some buddies that were doing a vertical ad network in finance. So Investing Channel was the company that we created. Cool thing about investing is you can do all these amazing things with a stock ticker. Somebody searches a stock ticker, you can know what kind of investor they are. And then you can position some of your advertisers with different financial products. So somebody's searching a blue chip stock or high dividend stock, they might be interested in retirement products.
Right.
They're searching for Apple, Apple stock tips, they might be a retail investor. So we were able to position different advertisers next to that content, which helped the content creators. Of course, back then it was all blogging was your content creator, but it was able to monetize that blogging content for those content creators.
Right. So with your computer science background, obviously you lean very much more into the tech side of things, obviously.
Very much so. Very much online tech, internet in my entrepreneurial attempts.
Yeah. So let's leap forward to Particle 41.
Sure.
Okay. So tell us about how the inspiration for that came, because I think there's a fun story behind it. You had a bet with someone and sort of two things happened at the same time.
Yeah. So in 2015, my partner and I were starting to, I was just getting calls from my past network. I was doing some consulting and had formed up Particle 41, and we started taking on clients. And uh, at the same time, a friend of mine called me and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about a legal services startup idea." In legal services, there's some dinosaurs entrenched in the space, some really older companies. And he said, I want to know if your LLC, your Particle 41 LLC, is in good standing with the Secretary of State. And if it's not, then you need to come talk to me about a business idea that I have. And sure enough, I didn't know, as a small business owner, I didn't know what it took to maintain my relationship between the Secretary of State and a small business. Just started it a year before. And so I talked to him, and he realized that there was this issue with businesses maintaining their corporate compliance. And so we built a startup called 𝓬𝓬𝓪𝓻𝓷. And I think we started that 2015 of March. And in 2018, we sold it to LegalZoom. In the US, LegalZoom's a pretty well-known brand. And then I stayed on with LegalZoom for 4 years as they, as I kind of did my 𝓬𝓬𝓪𝓽 commitment. And in April of last year, I left LegalZoom. But at the same time, Particle was growing, and we were kind of fine-tuning our service offering. So I had kind of an entrepreneurial product run. At the same time, we were growing a service business.
Right. So as a software development company, the world's moved very much to that. Almost everything is imbued and infused with tech. So, which works well for software development companies. And the other thing too is generally the CEO and the CFO doesn't really understand how software development happens. It's sort of like a black box, because code's never seen by anyone else except the coder. Okay, Ben Johnson, the coder, the CTO. So the CTO knows what's in the black box. So you're trying to. So how do you approach that in terms of how do you reveal what you're going to do and make sense of that to a non-coder? Because I'm a non-coder and I'm sort of scared of coding, right? I tried to do BASIC back in the 1980s and I wasn't good. So I realized that wasn't my core strengths and never went back there again. So how do you communicate with non-coders what you're going to do in the processes? Because for me, it's very much a hidden dark art, coding.
Yeah, I think we try to look for, what is the outcome when we're talking to the higher up the stack, if you will, the CEO. They really are wanting a very direct engagement. They're wanting to influence their business in a way that's very result driven. And so, my job is to say, hey, there's this code. I often kind of pick at my business partners when let's just make this thing talk to that thing and this thing talk to that thing. And they kind of ignore, kind of embedded in your question is ignoring the fact that folks need to go mine these details, like be kind of coders aren't coders. They're Zen gardeners of details, right? These kind of code is like it's a detail garden that needs to be perfectly groomed in order for it to grow right.
Yes.
And so I think that a lot of times executives will talk about it like Lego blocks, like, oh, that thing just snaps onto that thing, and everything's kind of this similar unit of work, and we just connect them, and Bob's your uncle. But I think what's really going on behind the scenes is all this detail gardening and grooming to make sure that things are just right. And so my job is usually just to say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? I'll take care of those details in the most efficient way that the market currently has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
So, back when I was doing the travel company in 2000, we were having to rack and stack our own hardware, put together a data center, just really take care of the full stack. Well, now you just go to AWS, you say, hey, I need to host an application, and an hour later you're fully up and running and live with at least the start of a thing. And so my job is to really hear what the objectives are of the business and of the business leaders, figure out which metrics in their business they're trying to move,
Mm-hmm.
and then to work with them on solutions and really just take care of the detail gardening that is the art of coding.
Right. So the CFO, CEO, or whoever is in charge of the project, might be the project manager, goes, I want to build a website that allows us to do online ordering. And we want to make sure it's easy for the customer. So websites are one thing. So is that the sort of thing you're doing? This is the outcome I want? I want a website that allows me to do online ordering, and I want to measure to make sure that it's working. I want to make it easy for the customer to buy. I want to do an upsell, for example, and I'm sure you'd have a lot of experience in that sort of thing. So on top of that, the website's one thing, but since the advent of the App Store, we now are seeing a lot of people use apps instead of websites. So talk us a little bit about the evolution of apps, the apps area, and where that's going today, because it's easier to use an app than it is to use a website quite often.
Sure. I think you are, obviously what has happened is now you have this phone in your pocket, right? The situational, very personal device, that apps are very specific pieces of micro functionality, right? I want to talk to my parents, I use Facebook. I want to talk to, I want to modify a picture, make a picture look better. I have an app for that. I have one that'll use AI to spruce up a picture now, right? Yep. So I think apps have taken advantage of these situations in life that were unmet or inefficient, and giving you a very specific use case for that. I want to order food. I have an app for that.
Yeah.
But there's still, behind that are these very large companies. The amount of technology that like an Uber or DoorDash has had to amass to make it that convenient. Oh, yeah. That is what we work. That's what we work on, right? Just making that kind of a service highly available, to where it's never going down, even though millions of people are using it on a regular basis. And so that's why we eventually added the data science part of our service offering, or the data engineering part of our offering, because even dealing with the multitudes of data around an app like that was a huge thing for the business to accomplish.
Yeah.
So I think of it not necessarily as a website or an app, but as a service. And these tech-enabled services, the amount of technology they need to effectively run and be profitable is quite tremendous.
Yeah, exactly. So making something look simple requires a lot of complexity.
That's right.
Yeah. And so you look at an Uber app and you're going, oh, but then you start to see how they upsell you, how they do this, how they track. You're going, oh, there's a huge amount of complexity. In other words, the ghost in the machine is working away, and there's many ghosts doing lots of things. And I did love your, and I was thinking about it as we talked about apps, is that an app's almost like a micro task, or instead of, it's not trying to do everything, it's just trying to do one thing really, really well.
That's right.
Yeah.
I've also seen that in commerce, right? Like I have a brand, I think it's Fresh Clean Teas as a brand, not obviously, but they just make a really, really solid t-shirt. And of course, that's what they became known for. But I think you even see to use your app analogy, you even see some of the commerce folks kind of like trying to edge in the market by being really good at one thing. And I think it's similar to an app. An app needs to be really good at one thing, just like some of this micro shopping. Like I want to make the best t-shirt or the best pair of socks. And so I think we see that trend where people just want to know, they want that place to go for that one thing, and if that one thing is super high quality and very convenient, then they're going to keep using it.
Yeah, and you got these go-to apps, and we also use apps for just messaging now, so Slack. So then you've got ones for project management, Trello, and the list goes on and on. So we've got this, I've heard of the term, which I totally agree with. Instead of Jesus's comment, where the meek shall inherit the earth, the geeks shall inherit the earth is actually the technology take on that, right? And it's true. So the geeks become the new sexy business, holding the holy grail of making complexity simple to the user and basically weaving their Zen detail magic in the background inside a very, very dark room where they sit in big chairs and look at computer screens all the time. So I'm leading to the next question, which you did mention. So the hot topic at the moment is AI, especially ChatGPT. So let's lean into that a little bit because it's even impacting the software industry. So I'd be interested in how you see AI impacting and helping software developers like you write better code faster and better. So tell us what you're experiencing.
Yeah, dog had to go out.
That's right.
Well, we're definitely trying to use ChatGPT to help the process of software development. However, there's even before ChatGPT, there was this thing we'd call monkey patching, and it was it was developers going out to the internet to find code examples, and then new developers would go plug that in, and there's memes galore about this idea of monkey patching where people just, okay, it works, and they move on. Of course, this is a horrible software development practice because true understanding and true quality comes from, like we were saying, the perfect detail gardening, right? And so monkey patching was the euphemism given for this kind of sloppy work of just taking examples and spatting them in. And so I think the same thing, ChatGPT, the negative side of it could be that it would lend itself to a new form of monkey patching, which would be just you ask ChatGPT, it gives you a solution and you slide it in, and you don't notice that it has now, put a bug in your code or, has not elegantly solved the solution. So you still have to have an understanding of every character, every piece of detail within that code. And but ChatGPT is certainly, I had a personal experience where I wanted to make something on my public corporate website a little more efficient and a little more elegant. And so I asked ChatGPT a question. I did get an example, and then I was able to learn from that example and take it and put it into my code. So it saved me some time. What it saved me from, if I had done this pre-Chat GPT, I would have had to have done, maybe 8 or so different Google searches, really understand the different perspectives from each of those Google searches, and then combine that answer into something. And so I would have had to kind of do a lot of that research, and we're just seeing that ChatGPT can save you from that and get you to the core answer a little bit quicker. But it's still very important to understand what it's giving you. It's like I can ask it to write a letter to my wife, but when my wife reads that, she will know that I did not write it. And so, we can ask ChatGPT to do all sorts of things, but we have to be responsible for the end result.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't use it as a crutch, just use it as an enabler.
I think so. I think it saves research time. 100%, it's going to save research time.
Mm.
Um, I even asked, what are common goals for a company trying to double in size? And
Mm.
it gave me a bunch of goals for a company trying to double in size.
Right.
I thought that was interesting. It just that I can't use that as my company mission now, right? I can't just turn around and give that to her. Here's your goals, right? It still needs to be thought about and and manipulated and made to you have to have full understanding of its recommendations.
Yeah. Yeah. I think everyone's got excited and think that artificial intelligence can do everything. It's really just another tool to help us, I suppose, accelerate our work and do it better. Uh, so it's fascinating times, and I think where there's going to be different jobs that are going to come out of this that we hadn't even thought about. There's going to be different opportunities that are still being created as we speak. Um, I've been doing a lot of reading on AI, and we're writing about AI and using AI to help create content. It's almost overwhelming because there's this explosion of opportunity and apps that are just and startups that are actually leaning in as well. So, but let's go back to software development. So, what's at a very high level, and I know you're a detail guy, but at a very high level, uh, what is the process? So if the project manager for a company comes here and said, we want to do A, B, and C, and we need to develop a tool for that, so what's your process? So I want to demystify a little bit about, because I'm a bit scared of, if I say, look, I need to develop some software for my business, and I go, I don't understand software. So what's your process to keep it simple and provide comfort to the project manager or the CFO, whoever's running it?
Sure. The great thing about software being around for as long as it has is there's some great frameworks for helping with that. I would say the first kind of principle here is visualizing, right? If you can do anything to visualize the end result, design cannot be understated as an important thing. So if you're designing an app, you need to be able to have a designer come in and design that app. And then we simply break down that app into its functional descriptions, which is some writing. But we just say, hey, the app needs to have a way to log in. The app needs to have a way to retrieve your password. The app needs to show this list of things. And we just start kind of listing out all of those things that the app needs to do.
Yep.
We have some developers come in and estimate those things to give you an idea of how much effort there is. And then we make sure that the client or project manager, product owner is determining priority. And then we go work off the list. So what we love to do is just crush a mountain of work. And that's kind of the process, is we build up a long list of work and we just start whittling it down with a lot of visibility and a lot of ability to give input as you're working. And then we collectively as a team get to see the product come together.
Right.
It's an extremely fun process. There's plenty of opportunity to adjust as you go. If you're hearing from, you could show that to users. Hey, would this meet your need? And have them come back and give you feedback so you can make adjustments.
One of the big problems that you hear about all the time is like cost blowouts. The start of the software development, you're given a price of X and it becomes 3X. So how do you make sure that that doesn't happen?
Cost blowouts are a function of normally what it is it's either so we always function. So I don't do any fixed cost for that very reason. What I want to do is say, hey, I don't necessarily know every single feature that you're going to want to put in your app or in your project.
Yep.
But I want to partner with you to help you figure it out.
Yep.
So what I always ask entrepreneurs to do is target their minimum viable product or something that they've clearly heard from a user. I want a thing that does X. And then we try to find a viable, that minimum viable. The viable is very important. A lot of people overemphasize the minimum, but that viable part is very, very important. Premature things don't function very well. So you want to make sure that it is viable, but you want to meet that need of X, and then you want to go get feedback and you want to build from there. A lot of folks just have more of like a construction analogy in their mind, where, hey, I want to build a house. So let's get a plan for the house and let's get the design, the designer involved for the house and all of that. And I wish software were like that, because that's so easy for people to understand. But civil engineering and software engineering are like complete opposites from each other.
Right.
And so I think having that idea of that MVP and then building from there, finding a user that needs X, you meet the need of X, they say, okay, well, now I need it to do a little bit more. And you build into demand. That's what software allows you to do. And that's how you prevent cost overrun. It would be no different in civil engineering if you said, hey, I want to build a house. Oh, but could you add a bedroom? Could you add a garage? Could you put a pool in the back? Of course, that's going to cost overrun. It's just that in software, those changes have to be really tightly monitored, just in the same way as a construction project has to be super tightly monitored as well.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned, a minimal viable product, and I love the fact that you highlighted viable. But yeah, it's true, because we all as entrepreneurs quite often think, well, I know exactly what the market wants, and then they take something to market, they spend a year or two building it, and then the market goes yawn. They get hit in the face by the market. That's why I'm going, well, let's just build one thing well, and that's the minimal viable product or service. And let's see if that actually works without blowing up the bank or robbing the reserve bank to actually get it done. Because as you talked about, building a lot of features in to software is going to cost you more money. So yeah, it's minimal viable product, I think, and especially in an age where we can get coding done a lot faster, a lot more efficiently than we used to, and bring something to market. Look, I think I heard there was one product that was launched that was wildly successful for a while, which was only built in a week. So I can't remember the name of it, but that happens a lot more now, isn't it? In other words, something that's just coded quickly on a weekend or something is then launched to test to see if it actually works.
There was in this we're kind of well into the SaaS era here. SaaS era, what I mean by that is there's a subscription for everything. I was even talking to a buddy who owns Treads. It's a subscription to keep clean tires on your car. So now you can pay monthly, and then once in a while they come by, rotate your tires or replace, give you a whole new set of tires or whatever. So there's a subscription now for everything. We're kind of entering in this subscription as a service era here. We've been in that era for a while.
Yes.
And so I think before that, there was this body of knowledge about bootstrapping. And in the software world, bootstrapping was this idea of how little effort. So it was more of an emphasis on the minimum. So it might be like, hey, what if I put a white paper together and I talk about the value of paying, saving a little money each month for your tires so you don't get hit with this big payment. So I'm going to put a white paper out about that, see if somebody buys it. Or rather than building a fitness app, I'm going to do a workout plan. And then, hey, if people buy my workout plan, then maybe I will build that fitness app. So bootstrapping is kind of it hasn't been a popular term for a while, but a few years ago, that was the super hot stuff. And there were a lot of really cool people talking about how to bootstrap your idea and start with, and it is kind of what you're talking about. It was a body of knowledge kind of talking about how to test your idea before you invested too much into it.
Mm.
And a lot of people were finding that when they did some of those principles and tested and tried, that they could be a lot leaner in terms of how to emerge a new idea.
Right.
In commerce, we see the similar thing happening with these micro shoppings, right? I don't want to go put a product line together for a whole litany of different fitness apparel, for example. Maybe I just need to be really good at leggings or really good at sports bras or really good at shorts. And they go out with that part, nail it, see that they're having success with that part, and then they expand their product offering, season after season, little by little.
Yeah.
And so we even see the MVP principle being used in commerce.
Yeah. I think that's a great example. And I think there was a company that's now $1 billion, and it's called Spandex.
Right.
Yeah, which was basically a pressure pair of tights as undies with a women lingerie that made them look slimmer in a dress.
I think Spanx. Yeah, Spanx. Yeah,
Okay.
Spanx was.
I got close, but Spanx, yeah, exactly right.
Yeah,
so, yeah. So that's all they did, which is really a great example of what you're saying, bootstrapping / just a minimal viable product without, building out a whole fitness wear range, for example, or so you're, instead of trying to, build something with the old proverbial question is, does my bum look big in this sort of question? And you know what men's answer to that should be. So we won't go there.
Right. Yeah.
So, all right. So we've talked a bit about the process. We talked about minimal viable product. So the other thing that entrepreneurs really need to work out is, and we talked about it a little bit before in the intro, who's your ideal customer? Because you really need to make sure that you have a ideal customer, or do you have an ideal range of customers that you focus on with what you do in software development?
Yeah. We usually target somebody between 3 million and 100 million in revenue. So I just am understanding the size of my business, and we do have larger enterprise clients. But I think, for my firm right now, that's the sweet spot. Is somewhere between the 3 million and 100 million range for our services.
Okay. Are there any application areas that you specialize in as well, like e-commerce?
No, we haven't. Like I said, I mean, we really like crushing mountains of work. So just in our history, we've worked in everything. Like I've had government clients, and
Right.
I've had e-commerce apps, social media things. We really haven't, because the craft of building software is the same across the problem set.
Right.
So really, we've been able to focus on internet technology and just make that a core competency. So we have the software development, and then we started finding clients that had data just in too many different systems. They needed to bring that together to make more actionable decisions about their data. So we added the data practice. And then since I was involved in a lot of online media businesses, I was an early cloud adopter. So the moment that I could do stuff on AWS Cloud or Microsoft Cloud, I was trying it out. And so we also added this DevOps practice. DevOps is also being called platform engineering, which is really just making sure you're getting the full benefit of the cloud for hosting your technology. And we have a practice around that. So we call it a DevOps practice.
Okay, cool. So what I'm also very interested in, especially in what we call a post-pandemic world where we've seen the rise of remote work, is what tools do you guys use that makes life and work easier that you would recommend? And it's going to be different for every type. So what sort of tools do you use to make your team productive and yourself productive that you use company wide?
Sure. So you mentioned Slack. I mean, we definitely are Slack users, 100%. We're heavily indexed on the Google stack for our collaboration tools. So we use a lot of Google Docs.
Yeah.
The Google Docs are great. That sharing component in the Google Docs, I know people sometimes, when it comes to like spreadsheets and Excel, they're very used to that, and the transition to like a Google Sheets. But to be able to sit remotely with your friends working on the same presentation document or the same Excel document, and each be editing different rows or different slides simultaneously, it's just unmatched in terms of the power of that collaboration.
Yeah.
I can get into a little bit more of the software tool process, but essentially we need an online list of work. So it could be Jira, Asana. There's a whole litany of these project management tools.
Project management tools. Yeah. Trello, for example, is another one.
Trello, yeah, perfect. But you got to have a list of work, and everybody needs to know where they're getting work from. You can't have this project management tool, but this spreadsheet over here, or it needs to be one flow of work. That's very, very important. And I'm also seeing for remote development teams and remote development companies, leaders have an interesting responsibility. Leaders need to be at least 4 weeks, one working month ahead of their teams in terms of what we're going to work on.
Right.
I'm running into this constantly where companies are spoon feeding their remote teams.
Right.
And it's just killing their productivity. And what we've been finding is that if you will get 2 weeks at a minimum, but 4 weeks is more ideal, ahead of your team saying, hey, this is what we're going to work on. This is what's coming up. People who need to do the thinking about that work or the design or the business requirements, they need to already be ahead working on those things, so that you're staying ahead of your workforce. And if leaders don't do that, they're not getting the benefits. And it's like it's a seesaw. If you're not ahead of your teams, then remote work is going to be a detractor for you. But if you are ahead of your teams, you're going to get that commute in the things that your teammates were having to do, commute to work, go get food somewhere, all of those things that they would naturally do. And of course, I encourage people to still do those things, to take a break once in a while. But if you are ahead of folks, and they're not waiting for the understanding around the work, you'll really see everybody, just able to grind it out and crush mountains of work. And leaders have a huge responsibility to enable that. So yeah, we've seen a big shift there where planning ahead and being visionary is super important, because if you're sitting at home and you have a question for your boss, you got to schedule a call with your boss. You got to go, get them on the phone. And that is a time killer. That's a huge time killer.
Yeah. And the other thing, I think, that I've experienced and interested in your thoughts is that you've basically got to make sure, as the CEO, the founder, to make sure that you provide the tools and resources and then get out of the way so you're not a distraction. In other words, your job, quite often, your teams look after the customer. Your job is to look after your team.
Right.
But the other thing too is that I've been very aware of, I come up with a great idea and then I mention it and everyone thinks that's a new project. So you got to make sure that you're not constantly distracting your team because you've got ideas as an entrepreneur.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're right in that same wavelength of what I'm practically and literally talking about is that the list of to-dos, and I'm not trying to micromanage my team. I'm definitely setting goals, and I want them to work on preparing that list of to-dos collectively. And so no, it's not. Don't hear me and think I'm sitting here writing a checklist for all my teammates. I want to create an environment where the checklist is prepared enough
Yes.
that it's well out in front of the team, whoever, like the collective is preparing that work stream, but that the work stream is mature and the work stream is healthy and the work stream is ahead of where we need to be. And then, yes, I'm expecting that folks are able to grind on that. And that's extremely essential. And then, setting that framework of cadence of how are we going to meet and how are we going to keep that healthy, that's kind of fundamental to remote work. And I think if you're doing that, then you'll see the benefits of this remote working situation. We were remote before COVID in the US. We've since gone remote globally. And so there was a destination, but what I'm finding interesting post-COVID is even the sales process. You say, "Hey, I want to come see you." It's like, well,
Right.
your client in New York is like, "I want to come see you. I want to do some FaceTime. I essentially want to build our relationship because it's in my best interest to do that." And he's like, "What do you mean? I got to drive in from Connecticut to go to the office? Why don't you just show me?" So
Yeah.
something I'm trying this year is to ask my clients, "Hey, when are you guys getting together? How are you dealing with remote work? Do you have is there a plan to bring folks into a central location? And can I do a happy hour? Or can I be a part of that in some way?" Because I think we're trying to adapt to how do we get people together. In fact, this week, all the US folks are coming together in San Diego to have just a weekend of FaceTime. And I think I love my people, I love my company and I want to spend time with people face to face. And we're just having to do we're having to be imaginative. And I think office budgets will turn into offsite budgets. And so you'll do that corporate retreat or you'll do that corporate offsite rather than maybe maintain as big or as much of an office. And I think that
That's
transition is
interesting.
happening.
Yeah. That's a really good, I suppose, idea of how we're trying to deal with this new future of work. And I think we've got to work out what's important and essential. And important doesn't mean urgent. In other words, I won't have a meeting with you. No. So, and clients might pull you up. And I'm more reticent to go and do face-to-face. Not that I ever really do it because I'm basically been remote ever since I started. And then we've got tools now that just make it so easy. We're recording this on Zoom.
Right.
It turns it into 2 audio files, you and me, which can be edited separately. It records it in HD. It automatically downloads and puts it into a folder for me. Then all I have to do is load it up for my team, put it into Trello via a Google Doc where I upload the video file and the audio file. And then the process looks after itself. And that brings up the next topic, just to wrap things up, is I think as entrepreneurs, we quite often, you may be different because you're detailed and very process driven by the sounds of it. I'm a little bit wilder at the edges, really. So I've had to fall in love with processes and systems for us to control what we do because you're a Zen gardener. And I really like that term, actually. So how important, and like entrepreneurs really need to understand this, how important for you is systems and processes for maintaining control and also preserving sanity?
I mean, I think it's super important. I think earlier, like late last year, instead of keeping like a separate task list, I had to make a personal decision to use my calendar instead.
Yeah.
So not that I would do something, but when I intended to do it. And that was like a little click. That's a difference in a system, right? There's nothing really wrong with my task list. I was good at keeping those notes. Nothing was falling through the cracks. But I just found that, to take that transition and say, okay, I'm not going to put this to do on here and then have to go back to it or maybe even interrupt myself to do it. Instead, I'm going to put it on my calendar when I'm going to do
Yep.
it. And that was a huge shift. I think we can always look for, if we think of our habits are a system.
Mm.
And our daily habits are a form of a system. And so any efficiency we can gain from that makes us a better entrepreneur,
Yeah.
makes us a better business leader. um, Another thing was, what's the value of a one-on-one, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm having a bunch of one-on-ones with a bunch of my teammates, um, is that the best way for me to spend my time? Or
Yeah.
is that creating um, is that creating an inefficiency? So just questioning, like, it's a very natural thing, right? I have 5 people on my team. Maybe you're a small entrepreneur just getting started. You have 5 different people you're working with. You plan 5 different meetings each week. You think, hey, this is great. um, I would argue that one meeting with all 5 people, if that is possible, and people are thinking about different scenarios in their mind as I say that,
Mm.
but is that possible? Would that change your system?
Mm.
And are there things being said or decided on in these? Back when I was early in my career, I had a bad cigarette habit, and then I quit, and I realized, man, those were the good conversations out there with the other smokers, and we made all these decisions, and then we came in and we told the non-smokers what to do. And when I joined the non-smokers, I was like, hey, why are you guys having those side meetings? We need to include the other teammates. And so you can consider things like that. So
Mm.
um just you know just consider everything is a system.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. And I think the other thing that you mentioned, which is really cool, and reflecting on it, was you're going, well, instead of a priority task list, you actually go, well, let's just put it straight in the calendar with to be done by 10 a.m. Tuesday, the 17th of March, whatever it is. And it's great. It just shows up with an alert, maybe 2 alerts, and you're going, you don't have to think about it. Cognitive energy is actually preserved. It just reminds you. Um, I've almost saved my relationship because I have an alert on calendar for putting the bins out, right? So,
yeah. Yep, the bin's out. That is a calendared item. You got it.
yeah. And then there's the other ones, birthday reminders. People, they know that you've been alerted by something, whether it's Facebook or whether it's, a calendar alert. But if you remember to call or send a message on someone's birthday, you basically builds relationships, and it's really quite good. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I will say, if anybody listens to this and they want maybe a potential idea, um, I find email to be one of the worst communication mediums that exists. And I think, as we were talking about AI, there is so much opportunity to improve this exchange of information. Email protocol, this inbox thing, I don't think that's the problem. But I'll just give you one specific example. Calendly is a nice tool
Yep.
for saying, hey, you want to meet with me, here's a link, select a time and we'll meet, right? It's a way of sharing my available times, but it's somewhat rude. Especially if you really want to meet with a person. You can't say, hey, meet with me, and select your own time. You got to be careful about that. There could be a potential rudeness there where they say, hey, I want to meet. Okay, go book your own time. What I prefer to do, but it takes more time, is,
Mm.
hey, when are some times that you're free? And you
Mm.
have this discussion. I would love an AI to do that. That
Yeah.
that would facilitate that. Hey, that virtual assistant, that finding a time. I'd love for that AI to be smart enough to know, hey, he has like 3 whole hours that are not booked. Why don't we put something in the middle of that, or say,
Mm.
hey, I want it tighter, along, so I can just do all my meetings in one go and then have more free time.
Yeah. Yeah. Batch it. Yeah.
Yeah, batch it.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of opportunities with AI coming up to eliminate email, and I just see, I'm frustrated that there's still so much spam and so much unauthorized communication through email. I
Yeah.
think that's still an area ripe for improvement.
Yeah. Well, Slack's goal was to basically make email irrelevant. That's what their goal was.
And for the most part, it has done that.
Mm.
For the most part, it has done that for internal communication.
Yeah.
I want to see that
Mm.
that external communication also improved.
Yeah. The other challenge we have in this 24/7 global world is that we all operate on different time frames. So Calendly integrated with Zoom has been a lifesaver for me in terms of uh, I'm not dictating to you, or when I send a link to you, for example, that goes, okay, Ben,
Mhm.
choose a time that suits you, but these are the parameters because you're in America, I'm in Australia. So, uh, and then it creates a link, which we're using right here, right now on Zoom, which is created by accepting or creating a time. So it's because I meet basically most of my appointments are either in Europe or in the USA, for example. So, uh, but the technology's made it so much easier, and I never cease to be amazed by the continuing evolution of software, apps that makes life easier. And now we're about to experience what AI is going to do to either confuse us more or make it simpler. And I think the latter is maybe what's going to happen. So, and any good technology that works almost becomes invisible.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, like the complexity of Uber or DoorDash or whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, the technology really has become invisible. You just request the driver, and the driver shows up.
yeah. And you don't
Yeah,
need
for
to,
sure.
and you don't need to know about the machine working away in the background, just as long as it works.
Yeah, for sure.
And we've got to thank, you know, the very smart Zen gardeners of software, such as yourself, that make that happen. So, any last tips, Ben, as an entrepreneur that you've learned along the way? One tip, two tips, whatever that are really important to you as an entrepreneur that you've learned along the way that would help other entrepreneurs that are struggling, need to be inspired, and need a top tip or two.
Um, you can't get time back, so go play with your kids, go say hi to your wife. The problem that you're trying to solve will still be there tomorrow. Like it's
Yeah,
not going anywhere.
yeah,
And so I think it's just it's about relationships
mm,
with and with your support system. And so just, value that.
yeah,
I think that's really that's part of it too. Like take them on the journey with you. Um, we kind of celebrate this grinding. I certainly do, but
yeah,
you also, take your kids to the park. It's not going to go anywhere. The problems that you're trying to accomplish are not going to go anywhere.
yeah.
And you may have a wonderful idea while you're pushing your kid on the swing or
Oh,
something. So
exactly, exactly. Yeah, I'm very fond of the Fijian culture, and they have a saying, which is, "What can't be done today can be done tomorrow." And they tend to live a very, very joyful life. They're maybe one of the most joyful cultures on the planet because they've learned to do things that matter and are important rather than just being this productive, Zen warrior that is being driven by a media like, news cycle or I have to do this. But hastening slowly is an art I think we need to continue to work on. And you've just mentioned that, which is great to hear.
yeah, I mean, I think we are so easily captivated by this digital world, right?
Yep.
We have very addictive short videos that we just watch all day long if we wanted to. Very stimulating to the mind, but not beneficial to our relationships. And
Yep.
so that's just something fresh on my mind that the value of screen time is minimal. and very fleeting. But you know, being able to spend time with your family and build those relationships. I
Yeah,
don't think anyone ever dies and says, "I wish I'd watched YouTube more," or
that's right.
you know, I just don't think that happens. It's always going to be, man, I didn't focus on my relationships enough.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's the tidbit. The business stuff will happen
Mm,
as we're consistent.
yeah.
But the relationship stuff needs attention too.
So what you've really said, love is the answer.
Yeah, the perfect weapon, right?
Yeah,
It's like, yeah.
exactly. Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure, buddy, to have a chat and wrap it up with some insights about how to live a better life and also be a good business person. And thank you very much. It's been an absolute joy to chat to you, and look forward to catching up with you in real life one day if that ever happens. But you know, our paths intersect, and a real face to face.
You know, I don't think I've ever had a Vegemite sandwich, so I would like to have one of those sometimes, you know, with a Foster's.
Right. Okay. So they don't necessarily go together, but they can. Uh, yeah. They may be mutually exclusive.
Okay.
Yeah, Vegemite sandwich is more the morning thing.
Okay.
You could have it with a beer in the morning, or you could have a Vegemite sandwich with a beer in the evening. But yeah, it's a Vegemite sandwich is something that is a very much an acquired taste and is very Australian, and also very good if you've had maybe too many beers the night before. That's how they work together.
I
A veg,
see.
it's sort of like a hangover uh,
Remedy. Yeah.
remedy. Yeah, don't know if it works, but it seems to be. A Vegemite sandwich seems to cry out to you the next morning if you've had a few drinks the night before.
I see. I see. That's cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun to chat.
It has been fun. Thank you very much, Ben.
Cool. Thank you.